Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. Once again, I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. I'm excited about our guest today, but I'm also excited about some of the new things that we're offering as a company. So we are, of course, launching our Plant Manager Excellence program in the fall. We'd love to have your senior leaders be part of it. And the other thing I'll mention is that many of our clients are coming to us with very specific operational leadership development needs. So one client recently had a conversation about high performance work systems and what does it look like when you empower your team to make a lot of those decisions. So if you've got a need either for an offsite meeting or some training that your organization needs, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation with you, and of course you can do that at uniquedevelopment.com. Now, it's my pleasure today to introduce one of our clients, actually, and we're in the midst of delivering services to them, but there was a conversation that I had with our guest, and it prompted me to say, I want to get this person into a slightly longer conversation on the podcast. So let me introduce you to Umesh Vendargon. Umesh is the Chief Operating Officer at Core Linen Services. He is a seasoned operational leader who has spent his career driving excellence across some of North America's largest service organizations. Umesh is the Chief Operating Officer at Core Linen Services, where he oversees operational strategy and leadership. Before stepping into that role, Umesh held senior operations and leadership positions at Compass Group North America, and earlier built a strong foundation in supply chain management and strategic procurement at Foodbuy. Throughout his career, he has developed a reputation for operational excellence, team leadership, and the kind of strategic thinking that turns organizations into high-performing ones. I'm happy you can join me today, Umesh.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
Yeah, and if you want to connect with Umesh or check out what Core Linen does, they can be reached at corelinen.com. And Umesh, maybe what you could do is help people understand. I'm not sure many people even think about linen services. We've actually done work with another linen company, local, that services hospitals in our area, but not many people probably even think of what Core Linen does. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Greg. So Core Linen Services was once upon a time part of Compass Group, a large food service company that does EVS services as well. And what Core Linen does is that we basically rent linen, or we process linen and we clean linen for predominantly the hospitals. But we also have some parts of our business that actually focus on hotels as well. Mm-hmm. We don't get into the food and beverage business, but our main focus is healthcare and hospitality. So what does that really mean? If you are a hospital and you want linen on your beds, you want your towels and you want your patient gowns and your doctor's scrubs, then what we do is we either rent it to you, in which case we buy the linen and we rent you the linen and we expect it back from these hospitals or our customers. Or the hospital or the hotel would buy the linen themselves. We will wash it and we'll return it back to them. So and this process goes on.
Gotcha.
So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Yeah, and as Umesh said, I mean, Compass Group, which is Core Linen spun off from Compass Group, it's a huge company, and so a lot of people, again, might not recognize Compass Group, but it runs some very large cafeterias and food service operations for institutions as well. Umesh, help us understand then your leadership journey. I mean, you've achieved, when I designed or when we created the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast, we had people like you in mind, people who have come up through organizations, and you've reached what I would consider to be the pinnacle from an operations management standpoint as COO. Can you give us an idea of some of the stops you made along the way and how you eventually became a COO?
Sure. So my journey has been somewhat jagged because I kind of started off in operations, then moved across to more of a corporate role, and then got back into operations. And there's positives and negatives to that actual process. Because when you start off in operations, you tend to get your hands and feet dirty, and you actually get to understand the process. And very rarely do you actually appreciate or understand what goes on at a corporate level, because we sit there and say, you guys are all, a bunch of people on spreadsheets. And then you get on that side of the business and you think, now I understand why they need the spreadsheets.
Right.
To run the macro side of the business. So my roles have actually changed over time. ever since I was at Foodbuy to now, to get to kind of progressing through my career, should we say. But the fortunate part of all of this has been I've been given the opportunity and the training by great companies and great mentors to be able to grow in these organizations. So that has been key.
Yeah, that's a good thing to mention, not just because we're in the development business, but I know Compass Group, for example, took its development very seriously, and so it's great for you to be your own personal endorsement of having those opportunities along the way. So I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned already the difference between managing operations day to day and making sure the work is getting done and at the right cost. But I wondered what your biggest either surprise was as you move sort of from being a site leader type level beyond that to the director level and now COO. How do you articulate the difference between being at the COO level versus maybe being at the site leader level?
Yeah, great question, Greg, because when you're at the operating level, you're very much hands-on. You have to be a leader plus a manager. You can't be one without the other when you're at the operating level.
Yeah.
So you have to lead the team, but you also have to manage them. You have to be empathetic to their needs, understand what the requirements are, so that you do get the best out of each operator. And when you're running an operation, typically in our world, we're talking about people for the most part, right? And you've got a number of people that you have to manage through everything from engineering through to the guy that basically pushes a cart around.
Yeah.
So they need that type of leadership role. As you move to more of a corporate role, it tends to be more in terms of strategic thinking because now you're balancing both. You're trying to get an end P&L, so you're balancing both the company's requirements, the stakeholders' requirements, along with what the individual requires to be innovative, to think differently. So you're trying to balance those two out. So I would say the biggest difference between those two would be one is more hands-off, the other one is more strategic,
Right.
and you're providing guidance versus being hands-on.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, the idea when people are told that you have to be more strategic is it's one of those words that everyone nods and goes, I think I know what that means, but I'm not sure you fully appreciate it. But really what you're saying is you're looking longer term and you're looking at essentially bigger bets or bigger scenarios where you're trying to advance the operations and organization forward with innovation. So I appreciate that. And actually, and this is a great time to insert the question that really prompted me to reach out to you in the first place. And it was really, I think what I'd asked you, and just to fill everybody in. So we're doing some leadership training for Umesh's engineering leaders and maybe eventually their production leaders. And part of that process involves us doing what's called a project success meeting, which is where upfront we start asking about things like KPIs and how are we going to measure success and so forth. And as an extra question during that call, I'd asked Umesh, I asked, what do you think is the difference between a leader who, like their technical skills, their technical chops, being organized and systematized, and the people leadership side? And your answer, I think, took me by surprise, and I think our audience needs to hear it too, because what is really the add-on factor of great leadership? So do you mind actually sharing some of your thoughts in that area?
Sure, I will try and recollect what I told you earlier, Greg, but I'm not sure I remember now, but I will try and walk you through what I think the difference is. So you have a structured leadership, right? Which means, like you said, you have your KPIs and you hit your KPIs and you get pat on the back and you said, you're great, you're fantastic. Well, that's good. But then on the other side, how do you actually get to those KPIs, right? How do you actually achieve those KPIs? How do you provide leadership that actually gives rise to innovation? Right? And that comes all of that comes through largely through spending time with your team, understanding your team. Like the banks have something called KYC, right? Yeah. Know your customer or know your consumer. It's the same with leadership. You have to know your team, you have to know your environment, and then you have to be able to give people the ability to be able to innovate and think differently.
Yeah.
Now, all of that may not fall into a structured environment. So you can have leadership that says, oh, here are my 5 KPIs.
Yeah.
You've hit your KPIs, great. But then on the other side, when you actually go to look at it and say, okay, what did you do to get to these KPIs? How did you do it? And did it have the right foundations to be able to give rise to go above and beyond these KPIs. And I think that's a strategic difference between the two.
Right. Yeah, and to refresh your memory further, because it seared it in my mind even more, was that you'd said that you could have the structure and be a very disciplined manager, let's say, and you could run the business part. And then I asked you, so what about the culture part and the people part? And I think your comment at that time is, and this is mostly just a guesstimate on your side, I think, as you said, the leadership and culture part probably is a differentiator in operating performance from one site to another of maybe 10 to 15%. The difference would be that you combine both the really disciplined structural pieces of being a good manager with the leadership pieces of driving culture and relationships. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the way I look at it is you go from good to being great when you can mix the two together, right? You can be great from a structure standpoint, but then if you really want to be great, you got to go that extra effort.
Yeah, and actually, now I know even more what prompted it. Is I think I just asked you about. I love coming up with new acronyms, Umesh, and making stuff up. So one of the things I came up with was operational performance variation, essentially, or OPV. And OPV just says if I have two sites, and by the way, this starts even long ago. I would always be surprised when you go into one location of a chain, like a restaurant or something, and have a great experience, and the place is clean and organized, and the staff are happy. And then you go to another location in the same under the same banner, the same name, very different experience, and it makes me think that, and you probably see it at your level with the spreadsheets that you would see, is like there is this differentiation between locations. And some of it can be explained away, as you've pointed out, through demographics and location and labor costs and things. And others could be really only explained away by the strength of the leader. So I don't know if there's anything more that you want to contribute around that subject, or that we move on.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can tell you from an engineering standpoint, I'll give you an example of an engineers we have. We have one engineer who is our GM, who's highly charismatic, has zero structure. But people will die for them. They will take a bullet for them.
Yeah.
And that's his way of getting to the KPIs that you're looking for. He gets to the same KPI, but he's completely not structured.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have someone who is very structured, very formal, and he achieves the same task. So it's interesting to watch the two. And really, the answer is, how do we combine the two?
Exactly, and I know that's partly what we're doing with you. So let's change tacks. Let's go back to a little bit of your own journey, and I'm going to combine two of the normal questions that I ask, because I usually say, first of all, what are some wins that really kind of built your own self-confidence over time? So what's an early win? But I often pair that with what's a lesson that you learned along the way, maybe from something that didn't go as well as you had hoped. And I just wondered if you could just speak to one or both of those.
Yeah, maybe I can do both in the same. So one of the lessons that I learned on the way was, I started off on the ground. We became a suit later. In England, we used to call them suits, right? You go from the floor left to management, you call them suits. And we get lean trained. And, that was the buzzword when we were growing up, was lean training, right? So we got lean trained, and we were doing one of the Kaizen events on the floor. And we came up with this brilliant plan on how we were going to save time and money, on how we were going to reconfigure something. And it was going to cost, I'm just going to put a number out there, so $50,000 to fix this.
Yeah.
And this lady who was on the floor, she walked over, she looked at all of us and said, "What are you guys doing?" So we said, "We're trying to make this change. We want to make this life easier for you." And she looked at us and said, "Well, all you're going to do is just move this table from here to there, and it'll be fine." So we're like, "No, I don't believe you. That cannot be right.
It can't be that easy.
It cannot be that easy." And we tried it, and it worked. So that for me was an aha moment. So whilst my entire plan of this whole lean and training people and getting it all done is absolutely fantastic, because it gave us a lot of benefits from it.
Right.
What I realized was that I wasn't listening to people. And that was a moment that I thought, you know what, I have failed all this time, because even though we've got these titles and we come up the ranks and we do okay, we don't listen to that little voice that is the most practical, and we miss a lot of things on the way.
Yes,
So
I would agree. And actually, we just had to, we just, it didn't have to, it sounds like a chore. We just did our 50th anniversary look back at, the first 50 episodes or the first 49 episodes of the podcast. And I would say, to validate what you just said, is to a person, many smart people have done a lot of figuring out. And then what they realize is that when they just interact with the operator or interact with the person in the system, they can often find more benefit. And I remember a lean guru who I met at another one of our clients, and he said when he came up through his like sensei and person who really was the guru, he said no matter how much you just want to tell somebody what to do, and even though it's painstaking to keep asking questions, he says it'll stick better when the other person tells you what they think would work. And as long as it makes sense, you do it that way, they will stick with it longer than if you try to impose something on someone. So thank you for reinforcing that.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, maybe this probably answers that question, because something that you might not have appreciated earlier in your career that now you appreciate. Is there anything else that comes to mind besides that lesson about just remembering to listen to the people?
No, it actually only I think I'd like to just add to that is that it reminds me of something that Einstein once said. The more I learn, the less I know,
Yeah.
and we as leaders need to be humble enough to be able to reflect on that and use that in our day to day. And I think we'll all do much better.
That's funny you say that, because I'm teaching a class this week. I don't do a lot of the teaching anymore, but the group that I'm with, and I said, what was the start of the scientific method, right? And of course, one of the tenets of it is ignoramus, which is that you do not know. And so if you understand that you do not know, then then I said, and then the scientific method is to develop usually a hypothesis, something you're trying to potentially investigate or prove, and then you run experiments to see whether you prove it. And I said, we're all really keen to prove our hypothesis, but there's value in disproving it as well. And I know in the world of academia, they always like, oh, I got to get my paper published and I have to show this tremendous cause and effect. But there's actually something to be gained by disproving these causes and effects as well. Sorry, that went on a little tangent there, Umesh,
No,
but you made
I
me
fully
think
agree
about
with you.
that.
That's very true.
Yeah. I'm wondering about what advice you would give to a younger or newer professional who may be working their way up either in the technical side of the business or on the operational side of the business, but who might say, hey, someday I wouldn't mind becoming either the site leader, a director level above the site leader, or maybe even someday a COO. What advice would you give to someone who's sort of working their way up through their career, maybe to help them shape their perspective of how to see opportunities and how to basically manage their career?
So two things on that side. One is internal, one is external. So the internal one is look, listen, and learn all throughout your career at all times. Never waste a second or a minute not doing any one of those things, because the more you can learn, the more you're going to grow, especially in the world of now AI, when things are moving at a much faster pace than when I was a young man.
Yeah.
That's all the more reason that people need to be more focused on actually learning as they progress and being able to evolve with that. So change is one of the things that young people today need to embrace.
Yes.
And that's from the internal side of it. The external side of it is work with people who are going to develop you, work with organizations that are going to invest in you in order for you to grow and for the organization to grow, and you can grow within that space or outside, whichever, it doesn't matter, but you as a team are growing. If you feel that you're stuck and if you feel that you're not growing, don't waste time, because time is precious.
Yeah.
Move, find that mentor, find that employer, find that company that's going to enable you to do the following, because change is quick. And if you procrastinate, we could procrastinate for 2, 3 years and it was okay. I think in today's world, you procrastinate for 6 months, you're in trouble.
Yes.
So that would be my advice to
Good
the new
point.
generation.
Good point. I think you're right when you talk about the acceleration of change. Just a funny little tidbit, since you and I don't get to talk that often. When researchers have asked people to look back at the amount of change in their life over 5-year increments, so the last 5 years, the 5 years before that, the 5 years before that, people always comment how much change has occurred in their life. But when you ask most people to look ahead as to how much change is coming in the next 5 years, we seem to lack the foresight to think that the same amount of dramatic change we've already witnessed and experienced in the last 5 years will probably be repeated in the next 5 years. And just so I love your idea of just being more willing to accelerate change and be more adaptable to it and look for those opportunities.
Yeah, and don't waste time.
Yeah,
time is precious. Yeah,
yeah. I think, by the way, my little tidbit for anyone who is not used to dealing with senior executives is do not underestimate the value of speed and getting things done quickly. Now, it doesn't mean that you want to put Band-Aids on problems. That's not the goal. But getting something done and getting it done quickly and well has a lot of value to it versus something that takes months longer than it needs to. And I'm picking that up with Umesh. And so if you're not used to that, a lot of more junior people can feel it intimidating to be in a senior executive meeting where they're saying, why can't we get this done in the next month or the next quarter? Why does it have to take 6 months? Did you develop? Where did you develop your sense of urgency and recognizing that time is precious?
So it happened to me in my 30s and my 40s, and I guess later on in your 50s it changes again.
Yeah.
But I realized that one of the things I noticed was my laziest GMs are my best GMs. And I'll tell you why. Because they get things done really quickly because they know they've got to get the following task done. They want to do it as in the shortest time possible, and off they go off and go hunting or go have coffee in the cafe or do whatever it is that they want to do. They're actually the smartest ones. And I realized that I need to do that. And if you can replicate that a number of times, sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because one of my colleagues who's my age, he came up in IT and he was actually writing code and he did a lot of server back-end coding. And he says, my rule of thumb is I never want to touch this code again. So I'm writing it so that it won't break and I will not get calls asking me to support it. He said, laziness is my most powerful motivator. But
Absolutely.
But to your point, reading just in sports, I'm more of a sports fan than I ever was an athlete myself, but I'm just fascinated by sports. And the one thing I read recently was the thing that you don't see about superstars is they do not run at full speed all the time. They efficiently manage their energy so that when they're needed, and we're right now as we're recording this, the FIFA World Cup is on, and a good example is Messi, helping Argentina come back. Of course, by the time somebody listens to this, maybe they'll be out. But the reality is that they're not moving at full speed all the time. They just pick their moments and they push forward and they do excellence, and then they have to conserve a little bit or else they'll just run out and burn out. So I think you're right about that.
Yeah. And it's time for reflection for them, right? Because they're actually reflecting. Because even though we call them lazy, they're not really lazy. What they're really doing is reflecting and saying, okay, I did this. Now what can I do better? What can I do faster? Because they know what's coming next. They know it's going to happen again in a different way. And they're trying to figure out now, how do I do it just as fast or faster next time this happens?
Yeah, I think the other thing, although Umesh, I don't want to make a big deal about getting older, but I find that as when you're younger, you might just keep pushing full speed because you think that's all it is just work really hard, and working really hard is important. And then you discover wisdom and you discover, judgment and thoughtfulness, and you think about, the overall impact. And so I'm glad you reminded me of that as I have a bit of a cold as we're recording this. And I think my brain's working slightly slower than it does normally. I wondered, Umesh, when you see, and I don't know whether you ran into this yourself as you got promoted, is a lot of leaders still get maybe more involved than they should in some of the day-to-day things as they get promoted. And I mean, we call it decision-making waste because really you're supposed to be, like you said, looking longer term, thinking about bigger pictures. I'm just wondering, have you noticed that in some leaders that they hang on to things that they should really be delegating? And do you have any insights on that observation?
Yeah, and there are two reasons for that. And I find myself sometimes in the same shoes and put myself in there. But firstly is that some leaders would rather not get into the day-to-day detail and truly provide strategic direction, encouragement, encouragement, and create the atmosphere for people to succeed and the whole company succeed.
Yeah.
So that's typically what most managers or most leaders should be. Yeah. However, then there are two sides. So those leaders sometimes when things are not quite the way it should be, or it's not going the direction that it should do, then they get involved into the detail.
Right.
But they should have the ability to get into the detail and out of the detail just as fast. Yeah. Right. And then not get sucked back in. So that's one type of individual leader.
Right.
Then you have the leaders who will actually enjoy getting into the detail of things because they feel that that's the only way they can control. And I think that's actually a weakness on this part of those leaders, because what they don't realize is empowerment, trust, training, and empowerment is actually a lot more powerful than looking over people's shoulders and saying, hey, you know what? Have you had tea today? And have you come back from your tea break?
Yeah.
So it's just two different styles and two different reasons why leaders get into it. One is because it's just part of their characteristic. The other one is situational. They have to do it, and hopefully they have the ability to get out of it once it's done.
I think that's a good reflection, Umesh, on that a leader who says, I can do targeted deep dives when necessary, both to find out what's happening and to perhaps help fix it. But I know also that I'm not going to stay down in those weeds for any longer than I need to. It also just reminded me of, in one of our leadership sessions, we have people act out different leadership styles while they're completing a task. And then we measure basically their production and also the team satisfaction. And so we had in our leadership program, you may remember that we talk about buddy leader, supervisor, hero, and coach. And so in this class, it was small enough. We only had a hero team and a coach team. And it was fascinating because the coach team, again, built the better structure, better satisfaction scores. But what I really noticed about the hero team, because the hero was there making decisions, solving problems, and some of his team were actually idle. So it was only a team of 5 people, but like 2 were basically watching while the boss made all the decisions and even put the hands on the project. And again, it just reinforced when you're the go-to person all the time, it's really tough to get leverage in terms of getting everybody engaged and helping out.
That's right. Absolutely. Because leaders should be looking at what happens 2 years from now, what happens 6 years from now. How do we restructure organization? How do we provide opportunity? How do we grow? But if the leader is going to spend time in the day-to-day detail, then who's driving the bus?
Exactly. Maybe the last question, or the second last question, because I always like to give you the last word, but I'm wondering about this idea of silos in organizations, alignment of people's priorities. I've noticed, not so much at Core Linen, but I've noticed for some organizations, maybe when they're even larger, they develop these little silos or fiefdoms where people are almost working at cross purposes somehow. And I don't know if it has to do with the scorekeeping, whether it has to do with the leadership providing context, but I'm just wondering what you've noticed around siloing and what advice you'd give to companies or leaders who are noticing that they're not all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, it happens in these large organizations, right? It's easy to start getting into a silo because you're so big, you need specialized fields, and you end up in a silo. So in a large organization, so I reflect on Compass Group. Compass Group had silos in terms of structures of disciplines, legal, finance, operations, sourcing, etc. And it worked exceptionally well. And the reason I think it worked exceptionally well was they had a complete open door policy amongst everybody, but their workflow was siloed. Now, here's the positive part of that was that everybody in that silo was an expert at what they do. They were extremely good because they were specialists. The downside of that is you don't know what your neighbor does, right? And you don't know how it actually all interacts. And there is a group that clearly knows how, and they put it together. But so they've been able to seamlessly integrate the silos from a management standpoint, but not a functionality standpoint, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. I mean, I had a GM of one organization. He says, I know silos can be a problem, but silos serve a functional purpose. You want certain people focused in certain areas. But he says it's usually about the shared goal and then the building of the networks between the silos to achieve common goals and achievement, right?
That's right. And then you got the small organizations where the silos are less broken, because you have multiple disciplines that actually get work together to solve a problem.
Yeah.
But that typically tends to be on a small organization. The downside of that is you run the risk of being a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Yes.
So you have to balance that out. So the larger you grow, I think probably the better way to do it is to be specialist in what you do. But have no silos from a management standpoint, but from a functional standpoint, it's important to have the silos.
Agreed. Agreed. I wonder. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, Umesh. So I'm mindful of your time. I just wondered if there's something else that you would share with our audience about what you think the key to success is, and also just how to accelerate results and make things happen.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd like to say is that you got to watch the road ahead of you, predict or be able to change when the environment around changes you. But while you're doing that as a leader, keep in mind that you have a group of people that rely on you, that you're taking with you. And they're taking you with them and on this journey that you're on. So as a leader, show empathy, listen, be humble, because those who are not humble will never learn because
Right.
they tend to know everything, right?
Yes.
And then execute as a group, and work as a team. And if you do that, I think nothing can stop you.
Awesome. No, I think you're absolutely right, and that really is a great way to encapsulate accelerating operational performance, because that's what we're all about here. So, Umesh, thank you so much. Again, we've been talking to Umesh Vendargon. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Core Linen. Core Linen's website is corelinen.com. Umesh, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Greg. Anytime.
All right. And thank you as a listener, whether this is your first episode or you've listened to all the episodes. I would encourage you to go back in our back library and catalog. We also, of course, have our Leader Feeder podcast, which is even more tactical tips and practical tips for leaders to be successful. As I always encourage you to do, if your organization has a need, whether it's just an offsite for your senior leaders or you need to develop your frontline leadership skills in your team, it all starts with a conversation, and you can do that at our website at uniquedevelopment.com. For now, I just wish you well on your leadership journey.